Is it good morning? Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Harlan. I very much appreciate Harlan being in front of me because it illustrates some of the things that I want to talk about. When I was invited to be on Special Populations, I wasn't quite sure what special population I wanted to represent. But definitely I want to represent myself as an African-American man living in America. And it is a very unique situation, but I also want to represent myself as a Detroiter and the person who heads the Bureau of Substance Abuse Prevention, Treatment, Recovery. We're going to take the and out too, and I mean recovery. And also in our community, we've recently merged under my leadership also HIV and AIDS, which are probably the two biggest issues that I think that we deal with in Detroit. In the Detroit is unique in that we are a community that is 83% African American. I was recently in Africa and I was looking around and I said, well, this looks like Detroit. I think everybody has that experience and it makes us very unique. And we have a very serious drug problem. And it springs from some of the things that I do want to talk to you about. But we've been addressing it, and we have been addressing it, I believe, in very creative ways, you know. And one of our leaders, Dr. Clark, who we always admire and honor, is that when I first came to work in Detroit about 10 years ago, I think he was saying no wrong door to treatment, which was a great thing. We need to make access available, and we made access available in Detroit. In Detroit, we don't have any access problems. We don't have any waiting lists. Every level of care, you can get in today. And if you call us up on our 800 number, we will send somebody out there to pick you up and to bring you into treatment. And even though we did that, you know, we moved to the next step to find out that, one, a lot of people didn't come, even though the door was wide open and the treatment was available. And second, that when they did come, whether they were successful or not, that word is kind of cloudy to me, they kept coming back again. And we realized that we really have to do something about this continuous cycle, you know, and defining what is it that people need. And we looked out there, and there's some kind of paradigm shift going on in the world now about recovery, and recognize that we have to figure out what is recovery that we're not doing with treatment, because we were successful in keeping people in, people getting in, but for some reason some people weren't successful in staying in. And you know, I'm not sure that substance abuse is not a symptom of trauma, actually. And we have great rates of every bad thing. It seems that black people are in the majority of it. Prison, most of it. We don't have the problem if you go out on the street and you will not see Chinese, but you will see black people, right? In the homeless shelters. You know, we're overrepresented in many of the areas. And I think that we as individuals working with trauma have to recognize that recovery is a whole process that really has to deal with the individual and have to deal with the individual problems of people. And with that, I want to again reflect back to Harlan. And as I sat listening to Harlan's presentation, I realized that Harlan presented himself as a culture, right? Harlan talked about their culture, their identity as people, you know, what their ancestors did. And he related to how that culture was systematically destroyed and the trauma that people went through within that context. And that is so important. And when we deal with, I'm sure, recovery within the American Indian community, we have to deal with the recovery of that trauma also. Because that really is, when you recover from that trauma. But as a representative of the African American community, I think that in America we have a unique trauma, a profound trauma that everybody who works in our community has to understand. When I talk to some of our Native American brothers, they identify that, in a sense, we don't have a circle anymore. The trauma of the African American, different than the trauma of the American Indian, was that African American experience was an experiment in taking away the culture of the people. So that systematically African Americans have no reflective look back on culture. And that's very, very important, because so much of what we do and what Harlan does is actually define himself by the past. And when you have no past, then what do you define yourself on? It is a challenge then to reconstruct a past in the present, in a sense. And in many ways, I think for the African American community, the whole recovery paradigm gives us another way of beginning to reestablish a community. Because in a way, recovery is reestablishing a community. People in recovery are beginning to see themselves as culturally linked through their trauma, and building principles upon that then say, I'm not responsible for the trauma that occurred to me. You know, what is the first steps? You know, I have to give up the idea that I can actually change this situation. You know, and it gives us a way, all the way to the part of building back and reaching out and helping another person. So what we're trying to do in Detroit is establish a recovery community that in many ways for us, is it on my phone? 13 minutes. In many ways for us, rebuilds a community within the community. And I think that it's so important to understand, at least for you and the clinicians, the people working in recovery, that when you work with individuals who have cultural trauma, that it is always there. I mean, you have to know it's always there. And it's there in a unique way. And one of the things also that Harlan brought out in me was, Harlan, did you notice, became emotional. You know, Harlan had a tear, you know, and in recovery, crying is very important. You know, we've got to cry together, because in my community, we need to cry about what happened. And move on, but never really forget what happened. And so we have to not only recover from drugs, we all need to recover from our past and our present. So I thank you very much.